everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming to the conference or inquiry celebrating reason. My name is Shauna Watson and I'm Vice President of CFI Canada. Our first talk is Why We Believe in Gods by Dr. Andy Thomson. Dr. Thomson is on the board of CFI in the US, and he's authored publications on a variety of subjects, including narcissistic personality disorder, evolutionary theories of depression, criminal behavior, the function of serotonin, PTSD, religion, suicide, terrorism, arrogance, the problem of evil, and the psychology of racism. Dr. Thomson recently retired from private practice of general and forensic psychiatry, but continues to practice as a staff psychiatrist. Andy, I'll turn it over to you now.
On the dogmas of religion, as distinguished from moral principles, all mankind, from the beginning of the world to the present, have been quarreling, fighting, burning, and torturing one another with abstractions, unintelligible to themselves and to all others, and absolutely beyond the comprehension of the human mind. Thomas Jefferson wrote those words in 1816. And the essence of my talk today is this. If you were to run into Mr. Jefferson next week, you could say to him, "No, Mr. President, religion is no longer beyond the comprehension of the human mind. We are now actually on the verge of a comprehensive psychological science, a comprehensive cognitive neuroscience of religious belief. And it is actually remarkably simple. You can illustrate why people believe in heaven and souls just using one of your beloved Virginia apples. Not only that, but that we are in that position today, because when you wrote those words in 1816, there was a 7-year-old boy in England, Charles Darwin, who would grow up to give us probably the most important idea that ever occurred to a human mind. And he gave us the only workable explanation we have for the design and variety of all life on Earth, and the only workable explanation we have for the architecture of the human mind, the pieces of that architecture that go into religious belief and supernatural belief. And what I want to do this morning, or this afternoon, is to give you a taste of that comprehensive psychological science. And we will talk about just briefly the modern Darwinian synthesis, then human evolution, and then a couple of pieces of that cognitive neuroscience, and then talk about ritual, which supercharges religious belief. Before I do that, I want to do a couple things. First of all, to thank Canada CFI for the invitation to be here. Doug Skeggs, Kendra Getty, Sienna Watson, all of you, the people that are attending today. Also, as always, a shout out to Robin Blumner, the president and CEO of CFI, and Eddie Tabash, the chairman of the board, and just all the work that everybody does for and with CFI. I wouldn't be here today without them. When Darwin published The Origin of the Species, the next to the last paragraph had this sentence: Darwin knew that his discovery would change our understanding of the brain, of the mind, of psychology. It took a while for us to catch up with Darwin, but it is that Darwinian evolutionary psychology and cognitive neuroscience that puts us in the position to understand religious belief. All of you familiar with evolution by natural selection. This is the traditional view of it, that evolution acts at the level of the individual. We now know that that's not exactly true. Evolution acts at the fundamental unit of life, which is DNA. And if you take Darwin and you combine Darwin with Watson and Crick, what do you get? You basically get Richard Dawkins, the modern Darwinian synthesis. And this is one of the best summaries of it I've seen. every organism is an integrated collection of problem-solving devices, adaptations, shaped by natural selection over evolutionary time to promote in some specific way the survival of the genes that directed the construction of those adaptations. So hemoglobin solves the problem of transporting oxygen. My lungs solve the problem of extracting it from the air. My heart solves the problem of pumping it and circulating it. At every single level of biological inquiry, Darwinian natural selection. But I like this statement also because this actually is a great statement of the human mind. The mind is what the brain does, and the mind-brain is this integrated collection of problem-solving devices, adaptations shaped by natural selection over evolutionary time. And it is some of those adaptations, particularly social adaptations, that come together and make us vulnerable to religious belief and to spreading religious beliefs. Another way of thinking about it is that the mind is like the Apollo spacecraft. What's the Apollo spacecraft? It's this compact array of engineering devices that are solving a constant stream of problems, only some of which become conscious to the astronauts. And that's the way the mind is. And we have these social adaptations to solve particular social problems, some of which are conscious or become conscious, but not all of them. And they are the ones that combined to create religious belief. Human evolution. We now know we are risen apes, not fallen angels. And Darwin knew this, and he hinted at it in The Origin of the Species, and then in 1870 published his idea that we were probably descended from African apes. He knew. And it is very hard to get our minds around the time scales involved. All of us carry legacies of Lucy, the millions of years of Australopithecines. But if you just take our genus Homo, imagine that today is 2.4 million years, okay? Every hour of today, imagine, is 100,000 years. At midnight last night, Homo, our genus, shows up, Homo erectus, Homo habilis. And by this morning, some of them had started to leave Africa, but it is not until somewhere between 9 and 10 o'clock tonight that Homo sapiens, anatomically modern Homo sapiens, show up. It is around maybe 11:20 at night that fully anatomically, behaviorally modern humans show up. And it is not until 6 minutes before midnight that we start to settle down into agricultural communities, possibly to brew better beer. But we'll get back to that. So you can see that for most of our evolutionary history, the environment that shaped us is not the one that we live in today. That the evolutionary past frames the experience present. The mechanisms we use in our mind were shaped were fired in the furnace of the African savannas for millions of years. If you look on your left, it's a Homo erectus skull, and pay particular attention to the frontal lobe area. On the right is us. And in evolutionary time, it's a very rapid expansion of the brain. Homo erectus, I think, was about 800 cubic centimeters. We're about 1,400, I think, cubic centimeters, and that expansion in the frontal lobe areas. What were the evolutionary pressures? What were the environmental pressures that generated that relatively rapid growth of our brain, particularly in the frontal lobe? Think about it. We'd left Africa 1.8 million years ago. We'd conquered the physical environment a long time ago. So what were the environmental pressures, the selection pressures that generated that huge growth in our brain? It was each other. The most challenging part of the environment, our social environment. And you want to think of the brain as a social brain, particularly the frontal lobes. And it's those social adaptations that go into religion. And then, we conquer the world. And keep in mind that all 7 billion people on the earth today may be the descendants of between 600 and 2,000 individuals who survived drastic climate change around 70,000 years ago. but we are all brothers and sisters. Put aside your racial, ethnic, national differences. Underneath our skins, we are all Africans. We are all the descendants of these hunter-gatherers that survived the rigors of Africa all those eons ago in the time before history. And why are we the last surviving hominid? It may be in part because we became an ultra-social, ultra-cooperative species. We achieved what the biologists refer to as eusociality, colony life, which insects have. We have multi-generational care of the young. We have cooperative care of the young. A chimpanzee mother won't let her sister hold her infant. You're more than happy to hold my one-year-old grandson. We have a massive division of labor. Think of all the different skills that are represented in this audience today. Defense of local groups and altruism, self-sacrifice, reciprocal altruism. And it is these social adaptations that are ordinary adaptations that you are using today. It is those, I still think they're extraordinary, but those ordinary everyday social adaptations are the ones that go into religion. Right. So always keep in mind that for most of our evolutionary history, life was an endless camping trip with close relatives. That's the environment that shaped us. The nuclear family was primary, extended family secondary, and then a slightly larger, broader community, still probably related, many related kin. That's the environment that shaped us in the harshness of the savannas of Africa. Now, religious ideas, all religious beliefs are byproducts of these cognitive mechanisms that were originally designed for other purposes. Another way of thinking about it, it's an artifact for our ability to imagine social worlds. Now, what does that mean? Imagining a social world right now, all of you can think about a conversation you need to have with somebody next week. That's an imagined social interaction with other people, which is automatic and easy for us, okay? Crucial mechanism that goes into religion. So all religions are going to be human concepts or human emotional mental concepts with slight alterations. Now some people say, well, wait, byproduct sounds kind of weak. How can a byproduct be so powerful? Well, just think about reading and writing. We don't have reading and writing modules in our brain. Reading and writing is a cultural byproduct. It's a byproduct of vision, fine motor skill, and our innate language abilities. And it comes together for reading and writing. And just think of how powerful reading and writing and literacy has been in human history. Another way of understanding religion is that if you understand the psychology of junk food, you understand the basic psychology of religion. So all of us have adaptations for craving ripe fruit. It was a crucial source of calories and vitamin C. But the modern world gives us a novel form of sweet, Coca-Cola, brownies, and that comes back to us as a supernormal stimulus, right? And I don't know about you, but if there's a peach downstairs or a brownie, much as I think I should eat the peach, I'm going to go for the brownie, right? And so that's a way to think about it. We all have cravings for fat, but the original fat was lean game meat, which is a rare and crucial source of protein. And now we have fat-saturated hamburgers that come back at us as a supernormal stimulus, so that it arises from adaptations designed originally for other purposes and comes back to us in a novel cultural creation that is a supernormal stimulus. Somebody sent me this. I just love it. Let me illustrate. So if you have been around young children, what does a one-year-old child do? A one-year-old child who can barely walk will stumble over towards you and will reach up and ask you to pick them up. The basic child attachment mechanism. And this is what we see in religion. People, that attachment mechanism is hijacked, and people are reaching up for a super normal parent. Do yourself a favor. There's an article called On Becoming Attached in the Atlantic Monthly, 1990, by Robert Caron. And psychologist Mary Ainsworth and English psychiatrist John Bowlby started to map out the human attachment system. And the beauty of that article is that they were still alive and they were interviewed for the article. But they started to map out this ancient mammalian primate attachment mechanism in humans that is one of the more crucial adaptations that religions, I would say, parasitize, utilize, hijack. All mammals, primates, apes, us, we come into the world already with neural hardware designed to find and latch on to these crucial, particularly mothers, these crucial attachment figures. So we come in with this innate neural model that mothers exist, mothers know how to help, mothers are able to and want to and will help, particularly when we are crying, when we are signaling need. Right? And we have it too. If you've been around infants, just startle them. What do they have? They have the moral reflex, to grab on to the primate mother, grab onto that fur. We've got it. But we also have the psychology of those innate mechanisms. So part of that neural model is that mothers will nourish, mothers have a face, mothers have a melodic voice. And these circuits, these neonatal, infantile, childhood attachment mechanisms persist into adulthood. And these are the circuits that form the basis of all relationships, not just the relationship you had early on with your mother, but the relationship you have with your attachments today, your friends, your families, your partners, your romantic partners, your close work colleagues. If you step back from it, think about the warmth, the smile, the feelings that go into those relationships. They're all echoes of and based on this early attachment mechanism. And it's these circuits that are particularly powerful, which can create the illusion of a loving presence, particularly when we are in a helpless, powerless situation. Think of believers who say that they believed in God when they were in an extraordinarily stressful situation. They were helpless, they felt powerless, and they had a feeling of God's presence. It's the triggering of those circuits. Now, I'm obviously biased towards my little book on why we believe in God, but if you've only got one book in you on this subject, read John Wattay's book, The Illusion of God's Presence, because it is a masterpiece. It's like Darwin. It is one beautifully laid out argument where he marshals all the evidence to support his hypotheses about religion, and particularly these experiences of the illusion of God's presence. I cannot recommend the book highly enough. Some more examples. Think about how do you quiet an infant? You rock. Infants are used to that vestibular motion of rocking to quiet the central nervous system. Think of the men at the Wailing Wall. They're creating that vestibular motion in the central nervous system. What's communion? Communion is being nourished, being fed by a parental figure. In this case, it's obviously children getting communion, but the same holds true for adults. And it's these ancient attachment circuits that are being utilized. And it's all over religion. Think about for a moment, if you were at some point a believer, think about your favorite hymns. And if you look at those hymns with this lens, you will see the echoes of these early attachment mechanisms. Amazing Grace, think about that. I was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Taught my heart to feel. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Yes, we have hymns of onward Christian soldiers, but most of your hymns are going to evoke that early, powerful childhood attachment mechanisms. Similarly with scripture. I mean, even though there's a lot of murder and mayhem in the Old Testament, again, if you put it through this lens, you will see all sorts of examples of where this is echoed, that God is a super normal stimulus, and better than any of one of our earthly parents. So that just, I hope, starts to give you a taste of the basic mechanisms that go into religion are everyday cognitive mechanisms originally designed for other purposes. And to go to religious beliefs, it's actually, even as bizarre as some of the beliefs are, I hope to show you that it is just one small step. What about belief in souls and the afterlife? This is one of earliest graves of Homo sapiens in what is today modern day Israel. This is an adolescent male. He's buried with various things that indicate, I think there were horns of an antelope, that indicate belief in an afterlife. Why would we believe in an afterlife? It's because of this, decoupled cognition. And this is a fancy word for the fact that right now you can, while you're still paying attention to me, decouple yourself from this time and this place and think about a conversation you need to have at work next week, or remembering a conversation you had last week that needs to influence the conversation you're going to have on Monday. You're still listening to me, but your mind can decouple in time and place, right? And you can have a complicated social interaction in your mind that's future, that's past, that's both. We can decouple our cognition in time and place. You can imagine a conversation with the prime minister, asking him for something and giving him something in return, reciprocal altruism. We also decouple our cognition in our very neural architecture. And this is where you can demonstrate this to somebody with an apple. Right? So imagine that this, got it? Yeah, okay. So this is your brain. This is your brain, imagine. And so this is your right hemisphere. Okay, this is your right hemisphere. This is the frontal lobe area. And the midline, the median, the midline right here. And it is in this area, the median midline of your frontal lobe, that you process your own thoughts and feelings, and you process the thoughts and feelings of others. So if I want to think about what I'm thinking, I'm processing it right here. If I want to think about what Ms. Watson is thinking about, this is where I process it. Now, if I am thinking about my, my right hand, I'm processing my right hand with circuits that are in my cortex, on the outside of my cortex. So frontal lobe, out here in the cortex. If I'm thinking about the position of my right hand, it's in the outward cortex. If I'm thinking about Ms. Watson's right hand, I'm thinking about it in that same area. So the brain represents minds and bodies in separate neural circuits. So just part of consciousness is that we experience and believe minds and bodies are separate categories, even though we know that's not true, even though we know it's all part of our brain. It's a default setting. If I had to have Ms. Watson in front of me to think about her, or to think about what she's thinking, that would be a real burden. If I had to have the body in front of me to think about the mind, that would be very difficult. But we evolved the capacity to think about what other people are thinking, and we don't have to have them present. And so that you can see that belief in some form of life that is completely separate from the body, again, is the default setting of the human mind. human mind brain. So it's just one small step to think about souls. It's one small step to think about heaven, a place where other people are. And particularly one of the mechanisms, what are called theory of mind mechanisms, they never turn off. I'm getting to the age where many that are near and dear to me have died. I can think about, I have conversations with them in my head every now and then. And that's just because those theory of mind mechanisms about what they were thinking or might think just never turn off. I suspect none of you got confused when I said next week, if you run into Mr. Jefferson, nobody stopped and went, wait a second, but what's that about? Because it's an instant. You could imagine walking down the street, running into Mr. Jefferson and having a conversation with him. And so you can see it's just one small step to ancestor worship. It is one small step to, worshiping a supernormal parent who's got a mind of his or her own that is out there, just part of the default setting of the human mind. So that I hope gives you just a taste of some of the cognitive mechanisms. There are more. I think those are some of the most important ones, but theory of mind mechanism, agency detection mechanisms, intentionality, our reciprocal altruism mechanisms. There's probably about 20 really solid, powerful mechanisms that religions utilize to create their power. How do these religious beliefs get supercharged? Well, ritual. And I love this statement of John Haidt. So that religions are particularly powerful at creating bonding. What does religion come from? It comes from the Latin religare, which means to bond. And look at Nicholas Wade, who is the science correspondent for the New York Times. And he wrote a book called The Faith Instinct, and he lays out the evidence for the argument that if you look at the religion of the Kung San of Africa, the Andaman Islanders off of India, who weren't discovered until the 19th century, and the Aborigines, if you look at those three populations, they have an almost identical religion. And these three populations are closest to the population that left Africa 100,000 years ago. I think it was 190,000 years ago, and moved east. And they have, and his argument is that if you look at this religion, this is a window into deep history and is a window into the original religion of Homo sapiens. And what is it? It is mostly song and dance. There are no priests, ecclesiastical hierarchy. It involves the whole community. Any distinctions of rank are leveled, and it centers on rhythmic physical activity and making music. And why? Because our ancestors literally stumbled into utilizing our neurotransmitters. I'm getting echo feedback from somebody's, I think, unmuted. Okay, thank you. They hijacked some of our most important neurotransmitters. Again, originally designed for other purposes. Serotonin, the oldest monoamine neurotransmitter. This is what we boost with Prozac. Serotonin is involved in regulating regulating self-esteem with social feedback. Serotonin gets us outwardly focused, away from inward rumination. Norepinephrine, everybody's heard of this, adrenaline. It activates us, but it's also important in marking things for salience and importance and memory. Dopamine, everybody thinks of dopamine as the pleasure chemical. Yes, it is, but it's a lot more than that. Dopamine is involved in motivation, attention, focus, marking, again, things that are salient and important. It's also called the do it again neurotransmitter. And this is what gets boosted when you exercise. When you do aerobic exercise, you get boosts in this. Oxytocin, everyone's heard of oxytocin, the trust hormone. But even more important, endorphins. Everyone thinks of endorphins as either the sort of runner's high, but endorphins more as controlling pain. I want to change your mind here. Endorphins are involved in bonding, a very important hormone in bonding. And when we make music, not listening to music, but making music or singing, we really stir up endorphins. And Darwin, as you can see, I'll let you read this. As you can see, Darwin intuited that music was probably an adaptation. And again, particularly involved in attracting the opposite sex. For those of you who have ever sat on a rowing machine, here's a beautiful experiment. Imagine that you're on a rowing machine and you do a set piece and we measure your work output. Then we measure your pain threshold. There are mechanisms for measuring pain threshold. So we do you on the erg for a while, measure your pain threshold. Then we have you on a machine, a rowing machine again, but you're rowing with other people next to you who are doing it symmetrically with you. So you're doing it together and you do the same work output, then you measure the pain threshold again, and the pain threshold has gone way up. It's harder to feel pain. So just that symmetrical movement with others in unison, and you get a boost of endorphins. If we were in a big auditorium and we randomly divided the group into two groups, completely randomly, had one group walk around the building a couple times, had the other group walk around the building a couple times, but in lockstep, like military, walk around in lockstep a couple times, come back and play economic trust games, the group that walked in lockstep would be more trusting of each other. Boost of endorphins, probably oxytocin. And that's the only variable. Again, think about religious rituals. Touch. Touch is much more important than we realized. If a friend of mine came in, put his hand on my shoulder, I would get a hit of endorphin, a hit of oxytocin, and the idling speed of my frontal lobes would ease a bit. It's that important. Another beautiful experiment. I'm gonna, imagine Ms. Watson again, and we put her in an imaging machine, and we show her a threat scenario, and her amygdala lights up, the fear response, boom, lights up. Now, have her in an imaging machine, and she's holding the hand of a stranger, somebody she's never met before. Show her a threat scenario. Her amygdala does not light up as much. Still lights up, still a fear response, but it doesn't light up as much. Now, we have her in the imaging machine again, and we have her hold the hand of somebody she knows, a love relationship, a partner, a close friend, a love relationship. And she holds that hand, show the threat scenario, the amygdala lights up very little. And the most interesting thing is, to me, that the degree to which it does not light up, the degree to which she feels safe and can measure it with amygdala response is directly proportional to her rating of the quality of that relationship. I don't know how many of you happen to see this. This is 2012. President Clinton gave the nominating speech for President Obama's second term at the Democratic National Convention. Powerful speech. He finishes the speech. President Obama walks on stage. Clinton walks over to him, sort of bows. The two men embrace, and Obama is just stroking Clinton's back, like there's no tomorrow. And you see a tear in Clinton's eye. Right? Very powerful moment. And what most people didn't realize was that up until a few, I think, weeks before this happened, these two men hated each other. And negotiating the rapprochement between these two men was like negotiating the Middle East peace accords. And it's this very powerful moment. I remember watching it, I teared up, right? Why was I tearing up? And it's mirror neurons. We feel each other's emotions. And whether we want to or not, we feel it. So that's why whatever's going on in a ritual, even if we may disagree with it or not like it, we're going to feel the effects of it because of these mirror neurons. Again, enhancing, if I'm feeling what others are feeling, even if I don't want to, that enhances bonding. And if you have a chance, sometime when you're at home, maybe, or someplace with at least one other person, ideally probably 2 or 3, do this little experiment. Think about how you're feeling about yourself, number 1, just how you're feeling at the moment. Number 2, think about somebody you care about, you're in conflict with, and how you feel about them. That's number 2. Number 3, pinch the skin on the back of your hand as hard as you can. Make it as hurt as much as you can. And those 3 things. Then with your, whoever's with you, put arms around each other, line up, put your arms around each other, right? So you're touching, got your arms around each other, and then start to sway, right? Symmetrical movement, touch, symmetrical movement, right? Back and forth. Then belt out a couple verses of Happy Birthday. Or even more interesting, even if you don't like it, belt out a couple verses of Amazing Grace or Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, or whatever hymn you remember. And even if you disagree with the content, and just, sway, touch, symmetrical, belt out those verses. And we're just doing it for a few minutes. And then do it in reverse order. Pinch your skin. See if you can make it hurt as much. I guarantee you can't. It'll be very hard to make it hurt anywhere near what it did before. And you've just done it for a couple minutes. Think about how you feel about that person you're in conflict with. I think you'll notice it has shifted. Think about how you're feeling. See if you notice any change in your baseline emotional state. This is the fundamental of religious ritual and the fundamentals of many rituals. Think about the wave at a sports stadium. Think about the rituals around sports. Same thing. But this is the essence of rituals and the neurotransmitters that are getting powerfully stimulated that go to bonding. And religious rituals serve a number of purposes with this intense augmented neurochemistry. It helps identify freeloaders, people that are not pulling their fair share. We have rituals for punishment of group members. Rituals are particularly important for commitment. Rituals are hard to fake, costly, honest signals of commitment to the group. Rituals are involved in courtship. I remember the early Sunday school camps on the weekends. I, certainly felt it more strongly for the girls. It eases communal conflict. It helps ease communal conflict. Territorial defense. It signals the quality and identity of a group. I don't know how many of you have ever seen the New Zealand teams, the rugby teams, or any of their teams before they start any game or contest. They go through the Maori war dance, and it's pretty. No matter how many times I've seen it, it's intimidating, and you're feeling it. And obviously, rituals are very important for preparing men for war, because we actually are not a particularly violent creature. We can be very violent, but our baseline is not as violent as most people think. There's strong inhibitions about hurting human bodies, and we have to override that. And one of the ways we override that are rituals, bonding in a common purpose of violence. I'll let you read the caption. So let's wrap it up here. It used to be thought that religions arose after we had settled into agricultural communities. And a discovery in Turkey, Southeast Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, has really turned things around in archaeology. And Göbekli Tepe was a religious site, a gathering site before we settled into agricultural communities, 11, I think 12,000 years ago. So while we were still hunter-gatherers, coming to Göbekli Tepe for these large gatherings and religious rituals. And one of, to me, the interesting things is that they found evidence that the individuals, the people that were gathered there, were taking wild barley and brewing beer. And I now tease my Baptist friends saying, you know, if you don't drink, you're anti-religious. But they were brewing beer from wild barley. Why? Alcohol stimulates endorphins, mu opioid receptors. Alcohol enhances our bonding. And it is now thought that we may actually owe civilization to beer, or it's certainly an important element, that we settled into agricultural communities to grow better barley. The original bread, einkorn, may not have been for eating, but may have been to store the barley to make beer. And there is really a serious argument that one of the things that led to civilization was trying to make better booze. There was dancing. This is from Göbekli Tepe. I hope you can see the figures. So there was beer and there was dancing, and there were religious statuary before we settled down, while we were still hunter-gatherers. So to finish up, one of the things I hope you take away from this is that the next time you see something like this, I want you to have a different view of it. I want you to see this as a dance. This is symmetrical movement. This is touching. This is chanting. This is making music. And this, all of it contains the echo of the original religion, and its purpose is to galvanize neurotransmitters to enhance bonding, enhance memory and attention of all that goes around it, including the beliefs. Buddhists have, we tend to think of Buddhists as just monks, but Buddhists have similar bright, beautiful rituals. And just think of the Tibetan monks chanting and those deep bass horns again. You know, the music, again, you still, I hope, see the echo of the original religion there. The men at the Wailing Wall, moving and chanting, and a lot of it is, you know, when I saw it, symmetrical. And of course, this. Here you see, you know, singing, touching. Notice the women holding hands on the front row, the attachment mechanism going. And I think one of the most interesting things is that when politics were trying to control religion a little bit, pews did not go into churches until the 15th century, and it was to try to control the dancing. So, in conclusion, I wish you could make up your mind, Mr. Dickens. Was it the best of times or was it the worst of times? It could scarcely be both. What I wish to argue is that Dickens was right. It is the best of times and it is the worst of times. It is the worst of times in the sense that all you got to do is pick up a newspaper or turn on the television, and there's going to be some news where religion is poisoning something and is getting in the way of us moving towards a global civil society, is getting in the way of solving the problems that face our existence on Earth. So religion is still, in some sense, the worst of times. But if I have done my work well this morning, I hope to show you that it is also the best of times. It is the best of times in that we're the first generation in the history of the world, in human history, that understands the psychological science, the cognitive neuroscience of religion. We now are getting tantalizingly close to a comprehensive cognitive neuroscience of religious belief, why human minds generate the beliefs they do, why we're all vulnerable to them, why we're vulnerable to accept them and to spread them. And we really are getting close to a genuinely comprehensive science of religious belief. And I think it leaves us with three questions. First questions, First question, what am I going to do with this knowledge? Second question, what are you going to do with this knowledge? But the most important is the third question. What are we, as scientifically literate democratic societies in the 21st century, what are we going to do with this scientific knowledge for future generations? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andy, for a fascinating talk. We're running a little bit late on time because of some technical glitches and because of the introduction at the beginning, but we'll take just a couple of questions, and apologies to all those who've asked great questions and we won't be able to get to them. First question, someone asks if there are any feminist perspectives on the subject or if anybody has examined the effect of gender assumptions on this area of research.
I know there's some, I'm not up to speed on it. Again, if you look in John Waddy's book, he has some, he goes into why, if one of the crucial basics of religion is this maternal attachment mechanism, why are so many religions still so patriarchal? And he's looked at that, I think has a very good argument that the patriarchal piece represents what he calls the social roots of religions, the social adaptations. And you know, but that's the extent of my knowledge on it.
Thank you. Another question, is there a significant difference in the psychology between polytheistic and monotheistic religions?
Yes, and it gets to environment. Look up Robert Sapolsky, the neuroscientist at Stanford, and he has a great essay on how in environments, the ecology of religion, and that monotheistic religions come out of desert populations, and polytheistic religions are rainforest religions and come out of that kind of ecology. It is just a brilliant essay. I think you'll find it wonderful.
Okay,
shaped by the ecology. I mean, it's just you'd never predict it, but it's just fascinating.
Thanks. And one last question. What do you have insight into what these findings might mean for protecting laws protecting freedom of religion and freedom from religion?
Well, I think we should, protect, freedom for people to be religious. I think I'm in favor of that. I'm at UVA, Thomas Jefferson, religious freedom, religious principles. I think we want to protect people' right to believe, but I think you have to go back to Jefferson, and as Christopher Hitchens says, build up that wall. James Madison, another local here, religion should have no cognizance in civil government. So people should be free to believe, but they should not be free to impose those beliefs on others, impose those beliefs on governments and on laws. And my hope is that the more that people, what I'm telling you today and what's in the books that are now out there should be in Psychology 101 textbooks in high school and colleges. So I'm still hopeful that in the generations to come, people will be educated early about why their minds are vulnerable to religion, and it'll help religion fade away.